Have you ever had someone threaten to take your child while you were sleeping in a shelter? That's not a dramatic exaggeration. That's not a metaphor. That was my Tuesday morning. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. My name is Maya Thompson. I'm 32 years old. And 3 months before this moment, I was a full-time medical receptionist with decent credit, a 2-bedroom apartment, and a routine that felt safe. Not glamorous. Not easy. But stable. Then the clinic downsized. 6 of us were let go in one afternoon. No warning. Just a handshake, a thin envelope, and a "we're sorry." I told myself it would be temporary. I had savings. I had experience. I had pride. But savings disappear fast when rent is $1,250 a month. Pride doesn't pay utilities. And experience doesn't stop an eviction notice once you're 2 months behind. 30 days later, my 6-year-old daughter Lily and I were packing our lives into black trash bags. Let me ask you something. If you had to choose between sleeping in your car or walking into a women's shelter with your child, what would you choose? I chose the shelter. It wasn't what people imagine. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't violence. It was fluorescent lighting, shared bathrooms, bunk beds separated by thin curtains, and a strict 7:30 p.m. curfew. It was job search logs, weekly case meetings, quiet crying behind locked stall doors. It was survival. Lily is 6. She loves drawing horses with purple manis. She still sleeps with a stuffed rabbit named Clover. She asks big questions in small voices. And when we moved into the shelter, she didn't cry. She just asked, "Is this like camping?" I told her yes. That lie still hurts. The morning everything shifted, we were sitting at the small metal table in the common room. Lily was coloring. I was filling out another online job application on one of the shelter's shared computers. I remember feeling tired. Not dramatic. Just bone tired. That's when she walked in. Karen Alvarez. 41 years old. Child Protective Services. Clipboard. Calm face. Professional smile. She asked if we could talk privately. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like the floor disappeared. We sat in one of the small counseling rooms. Beige walls. No windows. A clock that ticked louder than it should have. She didn't waste time. "An emergency report was filed this morning," she said evenly. "We may need to take Lily temporarily while we investigate." Take her. Do you know what happens to your body when someone says they might take your child? Your ears ring. Your hands go cold. Time stretches and snaps at the same time. But I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I asked one question. "Can you tell me exactly what the report says?" She blinked, almost surprised. Most parents panic. Some get defensive. Some get angry. But here's something I've learned. When you have nothing left to lose, clarity becomes your weapon. She looked down at the document again. The report claimed Lily was in immediate danger. That I was emotionally unstable. That the shelter environment was unsafe. That I had refused stable housing options. Refused. I almost laughed. Do you know how many housing applications I had submitted? 23. Do you know how many calls I got back? 1. And they required first month's rent plus deposit up front. But that word, refused, sat there like a stain. Karen kept reading. The report also stated that Lily had been seen entering the shelter alone from the sidewalk. That she appeared withdrawn at school. That I had demonstrated erratic behavior. A bad week had been turned into a character assassination. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to describe someone at their lowest point and pretend that's who they are all the time? I felt anger flicker. Then fear swallowed it. "Who filed it?" I asked. She hesitated. "It was submitted anonymously." But the reporter indicated prior connection to the child. Prior connection. There aren't many people with prior connection to Lily. Her teacher. The shelter staff. Or her father. Daniel Reed. 38. Works in logistics. Steady paycheck. Clean apartment. Recently started asking for more visitation. 2 weeks ago, during a tense exchange outside the shelter, he'd said something that hadn't left my mind. "If you can't provide for her, maybe I should." At the time, I told myself he was bluffing. Now, sitting in that beige room, I wasn't so sure. Karen cleared her throat and said something that made the air feel heavier. Emergency removals only happen if there's credible risk. Credible. That word hung there. I turned to look at Lily. She was swinging her legs under the chair, clutching Clover, watching us with wide brown eyes. Not scared. Just alert. Then Karen did something strange. She read one final line from the report. Her voice slowed. Then she looked up. Not at me. Her eyes moved past my shoulder. And stopped. The room went completely silent. The clock ticking. My breath shallow. Her expression changed. Subtle. But unmistakable. Something in that report didn't match what she was seeing. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. The report wasn't just words. It included proof. But what kind of proof could convince a social worker that my daughter was in immediate danger? And who had gone far enough to gather it? The report said I was unstable. But it left out one critical detail. That line kept looping in my head as Karen Alvarez handed me the document. I stared at it like it was a foreign language. Each sentence was carefully crafted to sound official, to sound urgent, to sound terrifying. But it didn't tell the whole story. It never could. The allegations were startling on paper. I was emotionally volatile. I had supposedly refused stable housing. Lily was withdrawn at school. The report even claimed that our shelter environment was unsafe. I read each line, my pulse quickening. My hands gripped the chair. Refused stable housing? I'd submitted 23 housing applications over 6 weeks. Most of them bounced back with automated rejection emails. One even demanded first and last month's rent plus a deposit up front, something I couldn't scrape together, not with unemployment and late bills. But the report didn't mention any of that. It didn't mention the desperation. The panic-filled nights trying to find a roof over our heads. The hours spent applying to every affordable housing program in the city. Just one word, refused. I swallowed hard and asked Karen, who filed this. Her face tightened for a fraction of a second. It was submitted anonymously, but the reporter indicated prior connection to the child. My stomach sank. There weren't many people with prior connection to Lily. Her teacher, the shelter staff, or her father. Daniel Reed. Daniel, 38, worked in logistics. Reliable job. Clean apartment. Recently, he'd been requesting more visitation. 2 weeks ago, he'd cornered me outside the shelter. His tone casual, almost rehearsed. If you can't provide for her, maybe I should. At the time, I dismissed it as empty words. But now, reading this report, the weight of it hit differently. Was he behind this? And if he was, what had he done to make this claim so credible on paper? Karen looked at me again. Calm. Clinical. But there was an undercurrent of unease I couldn't ignore. She explained that emergency removals only happen if credible risk is determined. Credible risk, I muttered under my breath. I thought of all the times I'd lost my temper when Lily spilled cereal. All the nights I cried in the bathroom stall while she slept. All the frustration that boiled over when the world felt like it was collapsing. Was that enough to convince someone I was a threat? I glanced at Lily. She was hunched over her coloring book, her little tongue poking out the corner of her mouth in concentration. Not fearful. Not unsafe. Just Lily. My Lily. That's when Karen's eyes flicked past me. Not to the report. Not to the table. Beyond my shoulder. Her expression changed in a way that made my skin crawl. What is it? I asked, my voice quiet. She didn't answer immediately. She read a line again, slower this time. Then she looked up. Her gaze held mine for a fraction of a second before shifting again, fixating on a spot behind me. I turned. No one was there. Nothing had changed in the room. But the silence stretched, oppressive and heavy. Karen finally broke it. This report, it doesn't match what I see in front of me. There's more going on than what's written here. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. My mind raced. Someone had filed this report to make me look dangerous. Someone had deliberately tried to make it look like Lily was in immediate danger. But who? Karen explained that the report included observations from the reporter. But the observations were selective. Misleading. taken entirely out of context. There were photos, notes, and even a timeline, but nothing that could actually prove immediate harm. I asked the question I'd been holding back. And this person, what's their motive? Karen shook her head slightly. I don't know yet. But the report had enough detail that we had to treat it seriously until we verified it. Someone went to great lengths to build a case. That line hit me like a punch. Build a case. Not a concern. Not a warning. A case. Someone had been meticulous. Watching. Waiting. Planning. I realized then that the report wasn't about Lily's safety. It was about control. About leverage. About fear. Then the most startling moment happened. Lily, usually quiet and reserved, spoke up. Her small voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying a weight I wasn't prepared for. Mommy didn't tell you about the man who watches us. My heart stopped. I wanted to ask, what man? But before I could, Karen's eyes darted again, more alert now. She nodded subtly, as if acknowledging something she hadn't expected. And that's when I understood that this wasn't just a false claim. This was personal. Someone had intentionally tried to frame our life, our choices, and our survival. And worse, Lily had seen it happen. The air in the room felt thick. The kind of thick that makes your throat tight, your muscles tense, and your mind spin with possibilities. Karen leaned back slightly, tapping the clipboard. We'll need to investigate this thoroughly. But until then, we need to ensure Lily's immediate safety. The words were precise, professional. But their meaning was terrifying. Immediate safety. Temporary removal. All those legal phrases meant one thing. I had to prove that I was capable of protecting my daughter. And fast. I looked down at Lily. Her tiny hands still clutching Clover, her wide eyes looking at me for reassurance. She didn't fully understand the danger. Maybe she never would. But I did. And I knew that what came next would define us. Not just for the next few hours, but for months to come. Because someone had crossed a line. Someone had decided that fear and manipulation were more powerful than truth and love. And I wasn't about to let that happen. The report wasn't about poverty. It was about a man. Those words echoed in my mind like a warning siren. It had never occurred to me that this entire nightmare wasn't just a bureaucratic error or a misinformed neighbor. No, this was deliberate. Targeted. Personal. It started with Lily. That morning, after Karen left to check something outside the room, Lily tugged at my sleeve. Her little voice trembled, though her eyes stayed alert and serious. Mommy, she said, the man, he watches us. I froze. My stomach clenched. What man, sweetie? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. The one in the gray car, she whispered. Outside. Twice last week. And yesterday too. He was looking at me through the window when I colored. My heart pounded. Twice last week? Yesterday? And no one had noticed him outside the shelter? I glanced at Karen, who had just returned. Her eyes sharpened. She asked Lily a few gentle questions. The answers were consistent. The same gray car. The same man. The same unsettling gaze. Karen turned to me. Do you know who this might be? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. There were only two possibilities I could think of, a stranger or Daniel. My daughter's father. Daniel. 38 years old. Steady job. Clean apartment. Reasonably stable. But recently, he had started pressing for more visitation. And he had said something chilling 2 weeks ago, if you can't provide for her, maybe I should. Could it be him? Could he really have gone this far? Karen sighed. The report includes photo evidence, but the context is incomplete. Incomplete. That was a word I now associated with terror. Because incomplete can mean misleading. Misleading can mean fabricated. And fabricated can mean someone out there wanted to destroy us. We went to the shelter's security office. The director, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, a tall woman in her late 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, joined us. She immediately recognized the description Lily gave. A gray vehicle like that? I remember one parked outside during my last visit. But it wasn't registered with the shelter. Karen asked the staff to review the camera footage. And there it was. The gray sedan, lingering across the street. Twice. Yesterday. Someone had been observing the shelter, the building, us. My stomach twisted. Every time Lily went outside, every time I left the room for paperwork or a job application, someone had been watching. And now, thanks to the anonymous report, they had the power to make it look like danger was imminent. Karen's face grew serious. If the reporter is watching your daughter, that's a major concern. And if the photos and observations were selective, the report could be dangerously misleading. I thought about Daniel. Could he be the one doing this? Stalking us? Filing a report under the guise of concern? It was hard to believe, but the evidence pointed in his direction. Karen made a decision. We won't remove Lily immediately, but we have to treat this as an ongoing investigation. Surveillance reports, photo documentation, timelines, we need all of it verified before we make any decisions. The tension was unbearable. Every time Lily laughed or whispered to me about Clover or horses, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that she was safe in this moment, and dread for what had already been done. I asked Karen, why would someone go to such lengths? Why not just request visitation legally? Karen shook her head. Sometimes it's not about care. Sometimes it's about control. Fear. The power to manipulate outcomes using the system. The words hit me like a blow. Control. Manipulation. Fear. Someone had weaponized bureaucracy, turned it into a sword pointed at my daughter. The director, Mrs. Whitmore, leaned closer, her voice low. I've seen cars outside the shelter before, unregistered. Staff usually notice, but if it's subtle, it can go unnoticed. I'd be willing to help you identify this vehicle further. I nodded, heart racing. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We weren't entirely alone. But hope didn't erase the danger. Karen tapped her clipboard. We need to trace this vehicle. Find out who is behind it. And most importantly, we need to ensure Lily's safety while we do it. I looked at my daughter. 6 years old. Too young to understand the danger fully, but perceptive enough to notice the fear in my eyes. I realized that protecting her wasn't just about sheltering her physically. It was about staying calm, thinking strategically, staying one step ahead of whoever was trying to manipulate the system against us. The hours stretched on. Footage was reviewed. Times and dates matched Lily's reports. The same gray car. The same unidentified man. Karen finally said, Maya, the person who filed the report didn't just accuse you. They tried to build a case. And this case, it's closer than you think. My chest tightened. Closer than I thought? That meant proximity. That meant risk. That meant someone could be watching every move we made, waiting for the wrong step to make their claim appear valid. I felt a wave of anger and fear wash over me. But beneath it, there was determination. They had underestimated me. They didn't know that I would fight. Not for revenge. Not for pride. But for Lily. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. This story wasn't about the gray car. It wasn't even entirely about the report. It was about resilience. About strategy. About seeing the danger before it's too late and acting despite fear. But what came next would push us further than surveillance, further than reports, further than fear itself. Someone's motive was about to be revealed. And it was far darker than I could have imagined. It wasn't about safety. It was about control. That thought hit me like ice when Karen Alvarez finally pieced together the evidence from the surveillance footage, the anonymous report, and Lily's statements. The gray sedan. The photos taken across the street. The anonymous report claiming immediate danger. Everything pointed to someone who wanted power over our lives, not protection. I sat at the small counseling table, Lily coloring quietly beside me, completely unaware of the storm brewing. Karen adjusted her glasses and looked at me with the kind of seriousness that makes your stomach drop. Maya, she said, we traced the gray car. Partial plate visible. It matches a vehicle registered to Daniel Reed. Daniel. Her father. My daughter's father. The man I had tried to keep at a safe distance for years. The man who had said 2 weeks ago, in that chilling tone, if you can't provide for her, maybe I should. Every nerve in my body went tense. I felt my heart hammer in my chest. Karen continued. He filed the report anonymously. Surveillance. Photos. Selective observations. It was deliberate. He tried to make it look like Lily was in danger in your care. I stared at her, my mind spinning. Why? Why would he do this? We weren't wealthy. We weren't fighting over custody in court. What could drive someone to weaponize the system, to try and take a 6-year-old child under the guise of safety? Karen leaned forward, voice low. We don't always know the full motive at first. But sometimes it's about control. About replacing someone else in a child's life. It's about fear. And it's about making sure the person you target feels powerless. A memory hit me. Daniel had started seeing someone new recently. A fiancée who couldn't have children of her own. I'd dismissed it as irrelevant. Now it clicked. His actions weren't about concern for Lily. They were about control. About replacement. About rewriting our lives to suit his desires. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My daughter, just 6, had become the center of a dangerous power play. Someone was using the system, the law, the very notion of child protection as a weapon. And the most terrifying part? That weapon had almost worked. Karen pulled out the surveillance photos. Lily entering the shelter. Photos taken from across the street. Alone. Taken out of context. All of it painted a picture that was designed to terrify, designed to make me seem unfit, designed to make someone else, Daniel, appear justified in taking Lily. I felt anger flare, hot and consuming. Not just at him, but at the audacity of using my daughter as leverage. But alongside anger, a surge of resolve took over. I had to act. And I had to do it fast. Karen and I arranged a supervised conversation with Daniel. He arrived, calm, collected, but with an undercurrent of arrogance that made my skin crawl. He tried to frame himself as the concerned father, the protector. I just want Lily to be safe, he said, voice practiced, controlled. But I could see the truth. The manipulations. The calculated steps to build a false narrative. His motive wasn't Lily's safety. It was control. Ownership. Replacement. I confronted him carefully. Every word measured, every tone steady. Why file a report anonymously? Why use photos and surveillance? If this was about Lily's safety, you could have come to me. You could have gone through legal channels openly. His face flickered, the mask slipping. He admitted, almost offensively, she deserves better than a shelter. But I knew better. Shelter life isn't ideal, but it isn't neglect. Poverty is not danger. Love and presence are what Lily needed and what I had. Karen intervened, explaining the legal ramifications of false reporting and the investigation underway. Daniel's composure faltered. The carefully constructed facade began to crack. He realized that the power he thought he had through fear, through manipulation, was slipping. We went through the evidence together. Photos misinterpreted. Timeline altered. Reports selective. All pointing to an effort to fabricate danger where none existed. The truth was coming to light. And I felt a mixture of relief and vindication. But this wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring Lily's safety, not just physically, but emotionally. The psychological toll of being used as a pawn could be lasting. I had to protect her from that as well. Karen turned to me and said something that stuck. You need to decide if you want to press this further. I looked at Lily, coloring innocently, humming under her breath, completely unaware of the danger that had surrounded her. And in that moment, I realized what my answer would be. Not revenge. Not retaliation. Protection. Justice. Safety. 2 months later, we moved into a small one-bedroom apartment. Not glamorous. Not fancy. But our own. Lily hung her horse drawings on the fridge. Clover rested in the corner. Routine returned. Stability. Fragile, but ours. And I realized something critical. The person who filed that report, who tried to manipulate the system, had underestimated us. They hadn't accounted for the resolve, the strategy, the love that guided every step I took for my daughter. Karen's eyes had seen it too, back in that small counseling room. When she looked past my shoulder at the start, she hadn't seen immediate danger. She'd seen a little girl standing calm, unafraid. Secure. Because her mother refused to let fear dictate their lives. It wasn't just the legal victory or the moving out. It was understanding that strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Steady. Focused. Asking the right question at the right time. Fighting not with anger, but with clarity and courage. And as I watched Lily sleep that night in her own room for the first time in months, I knew this truth. The storm could come again. It could try to strike. But we had survived, we had learned, and we had grown stronger. Because sometimes, being a mother means staring fear in the face and refusing to blink. Looking back, it all comes down to one question. One simple, calm, steady question I asked Karen Alvarez in that small, beige counseling room. Can you tell me exactly what the report says? It seems so small, so ordinary. But that question became our shield, our weapon, our turning point. Because in that moment, instead of panicking or begging, I demanded clarity. I forced the system to reveal its evidence, its motives, its gaps. Before that, everything had felt chaotic, out of control. Emergency report. Anonymous claim. Threat of removal. My daughter, 6 years old, suddenly placed at the center of someone else's agenda. My heart had raced 1,000 miles per hour, every instinct screaming that someone wanted to manipulate my life, our lives, and take away the one thing that mattered most. But clarity changes things. Perspective changes things. And action changes things. Once Karen laid out the facts, Daniel's surveillance, the selective photos, the anonymous report, everything became visible. The motive was clear. Control, not care. Replacement, not protection. Fear, not love. Someone had weaponized bureaucracy against us, trying to take my daughter under the guise of concern. I had a choice. React with anger, with vengeance, or act strategically. And I chose the latter. We filed a formal response, ensuring every piece of evidence, every misrepresentation, was documented. Karen supported me through the process. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the shelter director and donor, helped provide context and witness support. Every small step became part of a larger strategy to reclaim our lives from manipulation. 2 months later, Lily and I finally moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment. The kind of place that felt ordinary, but extraordinary after months of uncertainty. She hung her purple-maned horses on the fridge, lined up her stuffed animals, and whispered goodnight to Clover. I watched her sleep, knowing that, for now, we were safe. Real safety, not the illusion someone had tried to create through fear and false reports. Yet, even in that quiet, I couldn't ignore the lessons. The fear, the threat, the attempt to control, it had left its mark. And I knew that our lives could be challenged again. But something had changed. I had learned that strength isn't always loud or explosive. Sometimes it's quiet, focused, determined. And most importantly, it's protective. It's about seeing danger coming and acting with both courage and precision. I remember Karen's eyes that morning when she first glanced past my shoulder. She didn't see immediate danger. She saw Lily steady, calm, unafraid, secure. Because a mother had refused to let fear dictate her actions. I had chosen clarity over panic, action over helplessness, and strategy over despair. I want to leave you with this reflection. Being a parent, a protector, or simply someone fighting for what's right isn't about never facing fear. It's about acknowledging fear, understanding it, and choosing to act anyway. It's about asking questions when the world seems to have all the answers. And it's about holding steady when someone tries to manipulate the system or twist the truth. If you're struggling right now, wondering if circumstances define you, remember this. Poverty, instability, or a threatening situation doesn't make you unfit, weak, or undeserving. Love, attention, clarity, and courage do. Those are the things that protect. Those are the things that last. As I look at Lily coloring her horses now, a safe distance from the storm that once surrounded us, I realized that the battle wasn't just about surviving the emergency report. It was about reclaiming our dignity, our safety, and our right to define our own lives. And that, in itself, was a victory worth every sleepless night, every anxious hour, every moment of fear. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Don't underestimate the power of a single question, a steady hand, and the unwavering determination of a parent fighting for their child. That question changed everything for us. It gave clarity, it revealed motives, it guided action. And it ultimately saved us. The storm might come again. Another report, another false claim, another attempt to manipulate our lives. But we will meet it prepared, calm, strategic, and most importantly, together. Because sometimes, survival isn't about outrunning fear, it's about facing it, understanding it, and refusing to let it control your child's life. And as I tuck Lily into bed tonight, I know that the question I asked will remain the most important tool in my life. Not because it ended the threat entirely, but because it reminded me, and everyone watching, that courage begins with clarity. This is our story. A story of fear, manipulation, resilience, and the quiet, unwavering power of a mother who refuses to blink in the face of danger.